NEGAP, and I want to welcome you all for joining us for our first NEGAP webinar. We're very excited for this, and we're joined today by Dr. Robert Hill from Nova Southeastern University. So just before we get started, I wanted to just introduce you a little bit if you're not familiar with the GoToWebinar software. But on your right-hand side of your screen, you have a questions box. But if you have any questions as you go along, I'm on here as well as Ariana Belayan. She's our chair of the Professional Development Committee, and I want to thank her and her committee for making this possible today and reaching out to Dr. Hill and setting up this webinar. And they'll be doing monthly webinars for us as well. So thank her for that. And we'll be monitoring the questions box as we go along. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in that box, and we will either hold some of them to the end or we will interject as necessary as we go along. So Dr. Hill is a full-time professor in the Higher Education Leadership Program at Nova Southeastern. They're based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's a native of Brooklyn, New York, hopefully not a Yankee fan, but he spent much of his time in Florida, where he received his bachelor's degree in English education from the University of Florida in 1982, and his master's degree in educational administration and supervision from the University of South Florida in 1986. He later earned his EDD in Higher Education Administration in 1998 at Nova Southeastern, and while he was there was awarded one of the 2 annual National PhD Graduate Administrative Fellowships at the university's main campus during the 1993-94 school year. When not attending school, as he's been a perpetual student, Dr. Hill has been teaching and working in public schools and in higher education for his entire career. He taught high school English in the public school system for nearly 10 years before beginning to work with adult learners in a variety of higher education positions in student services, academic advising and support, student teaching, and faculty advising, and he's even served as department chair. So in addition to his role as a professor at Nova Southeastern, Dr. Hill serves as an applied dissertation advisor, and 3 of his doctoral students have received outstanding dissertation awards since 2011. So I want to welcome Dr. Hill and thank you so much for serving as our first NEGAP speaker and discussing the enrollment funnel in these challenging times. So take it away.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me. I see that we have 42 people, so welcome. I know that this is a busy time of the year for you. So I'm going to lay out the current state of affairs, and I speak quickly. But if there's something you want to interject, Marcus will let me know. Otherwise, we'll save time for questions at the end. I'm also going to share this PowerPoint, so you have my permission to use it afterward, and you can access it from Ariana. Okay? So welcome. And the title is Managing the Enrollment Funnel in These Challenging Times. And I don't think I need to argue the case that these are indeed challenging times, not just economically, but also challenges to our higher education model and our system, both public and private. So good afternoon, everybody. Right now, a lot of students have left campus and faculty, and this is usually a quiet time, but for everybody except you people, you all. And you all are busy trying to get ready for the fall semester, and I presume that's accurate, right? Most of you finished with graduation. You know how many students you've lost for graduation, which is also a happy time of year, but you're busy trying to replace the class and get people who haven't been accepted yet or fully admitted in place to start in the fall. And the primary focus here is graduate school. Maybe some of you work with undergraduates, but higher education has certainly become a marketplace, and there's a great deal of competition nowadays for students. It used to be if you build it, they will come. And in the Northeast, there are a lot of colleges, public and private. And it is very competitive right now, as we're all competing for the same pool of students. And this is not your student, the millennial student, the right out of high school, but how many of you have worked with, I presume some of you have worked with undergraduate students before, and the graduate student has certainly a different focus and different set of priorities than simply Russian fraternity. So some of my comments may undergraduates as well, but working with graduate students isn't always rainbows and unicorns either. Sometimes graduate students can act like undergraduate students, but I'm sure you've seen this metaphor of the funnel, so to speak, where it's wide at the top and then it slowly gets narrower as we go from prospects or leads to inquiries to applications and then people who've been admitted. And there's always people who get admitted and then don't matriculate and don't start, and then they enroll. So managing this funnel certainly takes organization and a system in place and the importance of data. But even once they enroll in your degree programs, there's also a funnel, so to speak. And many programs have easy admission requirements and then very tight to get out, maybe due to a thesis or dissertation or internship. But many programs also, you can carry this funnel metaphor over once they're matriculated as well. And managing the funnel, today in higher ed, we are concerned about branding and marketing and trying to leverage our brand. And these are terms that we didn't really think of years ago. And we need to know both the student data and characteristics as well as the institution. And certainly financial aid is really important, and there's not much in terms of graduate students. But I wanted to impress upon you the need for retention, because if we go back to the funnel, I could use the metaphor of a bucket, and sometimes degree programs, there's a hole in the bucket, and as we're pouring people into the bucket, people are coming out, and they're not going out, they're coming in the front door of our institution, but they're not going out the back door of the degree. And I wanted to talk today a little bit about enrollment, retention, how that's important as we move forward, okay? So hopefully you have access to data, and if you use Banner or similar information system, you're able to run reports. And if we look at this simple life cycle as a student, not life cycle of a person, but I thought that this graphic from Indiana University is a better image here. But we all deal with prospects, right? You all deal with prospective students, and then they get admitted, and then hopefully they persist, they enroll, and then they persist. They don't have to stop out till they graduate. And the term in retention literature is persistence. But many institutions have an attrition problem, which we'll talk about. And then if they go on to graduate, then they become alumni. And hopefully if they're satisfied and happy, then they'll refer other students to our institution, maybe their children, or maybe they'll come back and do a second degree with you. But they'll also then, if they are happy, contribute philanthropically to your institution and become a donor. And that's the simple life cycle of a student. And we need to think about our first point of contact with them. And then I don't know how much contact you have as mission directors or admission counselors, but hopefully you have some interaction with the students after they matriculate and while they're still in the institution. And why we're talking about this right now, there's an article this week in the Chronicle that says that many graduate schools don't know where their alumni are, and there's a need. And there was an article about LinkedIn and how institutions are using LinkedIn. Of course, LinkedIn was in the news for password violations this past week as well. But it's interesting that the Chronicle documented that many institutions don't know where their alumni are. And I'm sure those who are effective in recruiting are tapping into your alumni as well, as they can be a quite valuable source. And I put this graphic up here to show you that although you work primarily with prospective students, and hopefully you also work with current students as well, maybe some of you teach as well, but there's other stakeholders or constituents for a college or university, and certainly the alumni are important as well as the faculty, and hopefully the faculty are involved in talking to prospective students. I always enjoyed going out and talking to groups of prospective students. But I just wanted you to be aware of these various, certainly the business community, if you're in professional degree programs, that's important, as well as accrediting agencies, the families of students. We certainly know with undergraduates that the parents, the helicopter parents, are very involved in the decision making as to where his or her child attends school. So we need to be aware of these different stakeholders, because a college, like any organization, is a complex entity made up of many different stakeholders. And I want to start out with some data now, and I'm sure most of you with the Chronicle of Higher Education, and I encourage you to read it weekly or online daily, not just refer to it when you are looking for a new position, but they come out every August with an almanac. And these next 3 slides come from last year's issue of the almanac. And when we look at the United States as a whole, which has almost 310 million citizens, this is the age breakdown, and I'm sure most of you are working with this audience here. One second, let me get my stylus. You're working with this age group here. I don't know if you have 65 or older, but we see all the time in the news about students who, older students who are obtaining their degrees. But the good news is there are a lot of people out there who don't have advanced degrees in the country. And you can pull up for each of your states also the demographic information and the degree holder information. But I put a slide up on here to show you that in the United States, only 7.2% of our citizens have earned the master's degree. Nationally, only under 20% have achieved the baccalaureate degree. So 7.2% have achieved the master's degree, and only 1.2% and 1.9% have earned the professional degrees. And that's, if you look at the glass as half full, there are a lot of people out there who don't have advanced degrees who you can market your programs to. If you look at our roughly 20 million citizens who are enrolled in college, of course the lion's share is in undergraduate programs, but we have almost 3 million students right now out of our 308 million Americans enrolled in graduate and professional degree programs. And most are attending, as you know already probably, most are attending public institutions. And of our 20 million there, 73% of those attend public institutions. And maybe we'll see a change with what's going on in California and in my state in Florida. With the budget, there's certainly factors that are affecting public institutions. But I just pulled up this slide here for a second because I just pulled out some data in one of your states. I looked at where my wife is from, Massachusetts, the Commonwealth. Very different skewed data here. The baccalaureate degree is almost 22% in Massachusetts, and for the master's degree it's 11.4. For the doctorate it's 2.3, and for professional degree it's 2.7. So each state is different, and you should be aware of your own state and own demographics for public and private citizens in your state. And I know that many of the states are close together, and you're competing for out-of-state students as well. Florida is a much larger state, and our figures are not as good as the national figures. In Florida, only 16% of our citizens have a bachelor's degree, and only 6% have gone on to earn their master's degree. As I said before, most of the students in the country, both undergraduate and graduate, attend public institutions. I know that we have both public and private institutions represented in your chapter of this national association. But we're talking about 20 million Americans out of 308 million Americans that are enrolled in college. So as students are pondering graduate education, ready to take the next step, there's a lot of factors that go into that decision. And it's maybe a long process, but students are certainly shopping us much more now. They're much more savvy consumer than they were before, and maybe they're applying to multiple institutions. And as you're gearing up, and I use this, a lot of these images come right from Google Images, but if you look at this institution's graphic here, it says faculty members offer great insight and advice into seeking out and applying to graduate school. And I wonder if you use faculty as well, because students will want to talk to faculty or dissertation chairs and the people who deliver the instruction. So if you don't use faculty, then that's something you might want to consider. And I'm sure you have open houses all the time and evaluate transfer credits and talk about standardized tests and even have application boot camps, as this one institution on the bottom right. And now that I've framed the demographics and some of the stats on the potential market, I wanted to share with you some very mixed messages that's going on right now in the media and in the times that we live. Right now, in the Chronicle, there's an article that came out in 2009. It says, will higher education be the next bubble to burst? And equating higher education like the .com industry or the real estate market. And some people are speculating that it could be. And people are leery now. College tuition and fees have gone up 440% over the last 25 years nationally. And people are reluctant to want to spend $50,000 a year to sustain private higher education. And I'm going to visit this term consumers shortly here, but consumers have questioned whether or not it's worth spending money on an education, $1,000 a week to send their kids to college. And I'm, of course, talking about undergraduate right now. But there's a growing sense among the public that higher education is overpriced and under-delivering. And this graphic, I'm certain that you're aware of the debt that our students come out of our institutions with. And this has been a topic in the news and in the White House. And if you were to look at college tuition, is college affordable for most people today? Of the general public, only 22% agree with that statement. Ironically, the college presidents feel that 42% of them feel that college is affordable for most people today. So it's just interesting to look at those two stats just opposed. In the last couple months on 60 Minutes, they had Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal, who's paying students to drop out of college. And if you read the New York Times, David Brooks wrote an article about the campus tsunami. But there's been this comparison that higher education is going to become like the newspaper industry. And newspapers, of course, were giving away their content for free online. And there's this notion or this suggestion that higher education may go the way, some institutions may go the way of the newspapers. And when you read about Harvard and MIT teaming up, and of course there's other examples of Stanford, who are offering their products free online, it certainly makes it tough to compete against this. And of course, this whole notion of credentialing is going to have to be looked at in the future, but I'm sure you're aware of this development since you're in the Northeast with what's going on in Massachusetts. And also the sentiment from the general public that college isn't relevant anymore, and how would that translate into a job, and what is the perfect match? And I'm sure that you are looking at the U.S. News and World Report every fall when it comes out with the best college guide, and there's one, of course, for graduate schools, and you look to see how well your institution fares with the competition out there, in whether or not it's a liberal arts degree or professional degree. But there's a lot of attention to pay to these publications, these annual rankings, and yet many of us also rely upon word-of-mouth advertising, and I would venture to say that many of your students have decided to come to your degree program because they know a student who's successful and very satisfied, and I presume that that's the case with the audience here today. Just one more to talk about the mixed messages that are out there right now. In last summer, not even a year ago, an article appeared in the New York Times that said that the master's degree is the new bachelor's degree. And the article went on to say that that the master's degree is now the fastest growing degree, and they called it credential inflation. And the number has risen. You can see there in the yellow from 657,000 in 2009, has more than doubled since the 80s. At the rate of increase, it's quickened substantially in the last couple of years, and that's from the president of graduate schools. So we'll see, but we're also getting mixed messages. The Chronicle just did an article not that long ago, said the death of the PhD, and that we're producing too many PhDs. So we know that master's degrees are popular for colleges to very little front-end cost to offer a master's program as opposed to a doctoral program. And two more articles chronicled to show this conundrum that we're in right now. Will a culture of entitlement bankrupt higher education? And states, they're appropriating less money, but it's not because legislators don't value us, but it's simply because they can't afford to right now. And one last article, I think, from this crisis of confidence, that 1 in 3 college presidents see higher education or the academy on the wrong road. And they're concerned about the rising price of college. It's not the only worry, but they're concerned about growing international competition as well, and some other reasons. And unfortunately, this is a reality for not just graduate students, but undergraduate students as well. And here's an empty nest couple there on the left saying, in our generation, we start out with nothing, and here's a 20, 30-something having to move back at home with mom and dad, and with 5-figure student loan debt, and with subsidized and unsubsidized loans that the students coming out with large debt. And this is even at the undergraduate level. And finally, one last little news clipping, that in 2009, the Project Student Debt estimated that undergraduate debt was $24,000, and you don't need me to tell you that now, as far as a country, student loan debt has eclipsed credit card debt right now in this country. And this generation might be the most indebted generation in history, without the possibility of dependable jobs that it needs to escape the debt. The White House just released that figure, $26,000 in terms of 2012. Today's college students graduate with an average, and this is undergraduate, so you could understand that why graduate students might be reluctant to want to take out a loan. And there's no work study or Pell Grants available for graduate students. And some cartoons here to express some of these slides that I showed you. I wasted a lot of time in graduate school to get this job, meaning the relevance that the person put in his time. I wasted a lot of time in graduate school to get this job. And this one here, I call it grad school. You call it grad school, but I call it raising the debt ceiling. So you have a lot of things, and not to mention the graphic there on the left, have a PhD, will work for food, and the sense about liberal arts degrees, which are under attack now. I have a degree in the liberal arts. Do you want fries with that? I'm sure you've heard sentiments expressed such as that. So colleges now are much more accountable than they have been before, and this notion or this era of no child left behind in K through 12 has now ended up on the doors of our colleges and universities. And in the past, we were very reluctant to respond to questions from legislators or the general public or the citizens. Where does the money go? And why isn't college more efficient? And we have always said stuff like, trust us, we're experts, and what we do cannot be measured, we're different. So that's why, as I set the frame here, or tried to set the case, that enrollment management is very important nowadays to talk about not just recruiting, because once you get them in the seats, we want to retain students, because it's obviously easier to retain a student than to go out and get a new student to go through that whole process again. So most colleges and universities now have someone designated who's responsible for managing the enrollment and coordinating efforts between the recruitment end and retention end, and trying to work together to create a plan to enroll more students and to reduce the attrition rates. And it's certainly a hot topic. There's an article in the Chronicle yesterday that University of Southern California is going to add a certificate program in enrollment management. And many graduate programs in higher ed don't have a concentration in enrollment management, but it's certainly a necessary area in higher ed that we need to know more about. Usually a person who oversees enrollment management reports to a vice president or provost or even the president, and there are many different associations that deal with enrollment management. But I hope that your institution has an annual enrollment management plan, and it looks at coordinating efforts to achieve new and returning student goals through collaborating through marketing and recruitment and retention effort. Unfortunately, many colleges and universities work in silos. I'm sure you've heard this metaphor before, the silo mentality. And a university is made up of different colleges, a college of business or college of undergraduate studies or arts and sciences or school of education, school of psychology. And unfortunately, this is the reality in many colleges. I'm sure glad the whole isn't in RN, but we're all in this together, right? And I'm sure that that's not your institution. And if you look at the student experience in this triangle here, there are many factors that affect that student experience. Social factors, certainly the student's own cognitive factors, but institutionally there are factors that affect the overall experience. And there's just a number of them: financial aid and recruitment, academic support, student services, curriculum instruction. Those are things that the institution's responsible for. But over here we have these, and over here we have these. There are many things that go into the overall student experience. And in undergraduate education, the key is the whole freshman year or first semester. We have many students that don't come back after Christmas. There are some students that don't come back after Thanksgiving, but the key is if we can get students to be engaged and have a meaningful first semester, then the likelihood that they'll persist increases. And just as you need to know information about the student is gathering information about your institution as well. And you should also know, for instance, what is the tuition of the local colleges, universities in your area, and what are their degree programs, and what are their internship or externship requirements, etc. Because the student is certainly aware of it, the prospective student, as you should be as well. And it points to the importance of data. I know I'm going quickly, but I'm going to a stopping point soon. But we now are here in this notion of what is the return on investment what is the ROI in terms of taking on this extra 36 credits, a master's degree? And many master's degrees now have dropped their thesis or their practicum, and it's, if you look at it, it's another 12 credits, another 12 courses. Some students are thinking of it in terms of that, and they're wondering what is the ROI. But student retention to graduation, and you don't get many transfer students in graduate school, is usually the best indication of student satisfaction for those whose goal it is to get a degree. And in teacher education, my area that I used to work with, we get some students that just want certification, which is fine, and they don't want to seek out a degree program. But usually persistence through commencement is usually the best indication of whether or not the students are satisfied. And I also put up there in yellow, no institution can satisfy everyone or try to be everything to everybody. You need to find out what is your niche. And here's a slide that I could literally spend a whole presentation on, the benefits of going on for higher education, and I won't right now, but just to show you these four quadrants in terms of speaking to groups of students about the private gains of higher education, both economically and socially, as well as the societal or the public gains of having an educated citizens. So we'll move on, but you will have this access to this PowerPoint, and there are many arguments, compelling arguments as to why, besides just looking at earned income potential over the course of a lifetime. So I know in business and industry the term for the public is customer. In higher education, and I'm a faculty member, so I'm certainly cognizant that I have some colleagues in the academy who would find the term inappropriate to refer to students as customers, because it conjures up this notion that I deserve an A. I'm like one of your best customers, or students, I mean. And they are certainly very conscious of the amount of time and money that they spend for your class or your classes. And dealing with graduate students, there's a lot of ego involved, and we don't want to paint all students with the same brush, but I found this cartoon very quickly in Google Images. And these students already have achieved success at the undergraduate level. But whether or not you use the term customer or client or purchaser or consumer, they're not fully interchangeable terms. So it's suggested by Bill Turney and others in higher education that using the people you serve avoids the negative connotations that that word customer denotes or connotes to people in higher education. But I don't think I think I'm preaching to the choir here when I say that without students, institutions of higher education would not exist. Because we're in the service industry, and it requires two things: a service and someone who needs or wants that service, or in this case, a degree program. But this notion that without students that colleges wouldn't exist, it's like hospitals. Doctors complaining that a hospital would be a really good place to work if it wasn't for these patients. So that's the reality, that higher education has been the last bastion. Business and corporations and healthcare have embraced total quality management and continuous quality improvement, but colleges and universities have been slow to look at how they treat students. And simply because the university continues to attract students who really complain or boycott or go to the dean's office, you cannot take that as an indication that the students are satisfied. Many adult students don't have the time or luxury to make an appointment, to come in and see somebody or to complain. They just want to get their degree. But if your institution is guilty of any of these things, such as enrolling students in classes for which they already know the material, or that they cannot graduate in the advertised amount of of time due to closed classes, then your university needs perhaps to focus a few more examples on its customer focus at your institution. And many of our institutions, I would venture to say, are doing these things and are collecting information on what students want and they need. I'm sure your institutions do course evaluations, although most institutions who move to online course evaluations are seeing a very slow response rate. It used to be when we left the room and someone collected up the evaluations, we got a 100% return rate. Now, even at Nova, we are seeing below a 40% return student course evaluations. But I'm sure you are doing surveys or comment cards or focus groups, or you have advisory councils. You do some needs assessment in the student service areas. You have market research now, and you're looking at academic achievement, and you maybe do exit interviews of the students and their reasons for leaving, and you're looking at course take patterns. Or these are things that we should all be doing, because we certainly need to know our students, and I'll use the term students, in much more detail. And of course, that means who they are, but why are they at our institutions? What are their expectations of us? What kinds of problems do they have? And if they have a problem, where do they turn when they have these problems? And we can have the greatest services, but if students aren't aware of these services, then what are they doing? And also, importantly, what and how well they're learning. And if we drilled deeper and we did a little digging, we might learn that many of our students are lost because of the size of the institution, or we assume that they can make sound academic decisions, and in often case they are lost. But I also want to caution you that if you do solicit feedback and you do collect data, then you have a commitment to act upon the results and to let the people know what it is that you've done with that data, and to publish it as well. And I would also encourage you to talk to the people on the front lines, the people who work the phones and at the counters, because these students, in terms of customer service, have the most direct and comprehensive experience to identify problems. And if you ever call your institution, find out how often you've been on hold or been bounced around. And that's what students go through, and we can never get another attempt at a first impression. So these are things to think about. And if you're the director of admissions, then you certainly, and it takes consistent leadership to change cultures, but if you walked around and asked the people who you supervise and manage, how well are you meeting the needs of the people, and how do you know, are you improving upon that, and how can I help? That would be a good weekly, if not monthly, exercise for you to go out and be visible and to solicit those 4 questions from your followers. In terms of higher education, we seldom hear the term that we're an Ivy Tower, and we've made, as an industry, great strides in improving and meeting the needs of the people we serve. Now we need to care more for the people we serve. And you all in admissions need to be aware of the drivers of change. And there's an organization called SCOOP, S-C-U-P, and I encourage you to be familiar with the Society for the Council of University Planners. But they put out the trends, the 2011 trends or 2010 trends for these different drivers, demographics, economics, technology, etc. And you could go on your website and pull those out. There are certainly new challenges for higher education. And the one there in green, fields of study that were once clear-cut are much more blurred now. And these are certainly some of the challenges that we as in higher education face. Okay. I like this quote here by former Secretary of Education under President Clinton and the former two-term governor of South Carolina, one of my favorite secretaries of education we had. I'll let you read that quote right there. And there's a great YouTube video out there as well. But that is when I say that we have blurred degree programs right now. And there are certainly more popular majors, and we need to know what majors are in demand right now. But certainly we need to be aware of where the trend, what the drivers of change are forecasting, and what's come down the pipe. Art Levine, who used to be the dean of the Teachers College at Columbia, talks about institutions as three different types. The bricks and mortar institutions, such as the colonial colleges there in the Northeast. And we'll also have fully online institutions, and we'll talk about Western Governors in a second, click universities. And then we'll have institutions who are both bricks and click institutions. Because today's consumers, you hear ads on the radio and on the television if you're home during the day, college at your convenience, right? And you hear ads that say take a degree online, and there are many decisions to enroll online, and it's not cost. The first one is the convenience. And cost is number 6. This is from Noel Levitt, a higher ed consultant group. But those are the factors that students look at in their decisions to enroll in an online degree program. Work schedule and flexibility of pacing are tied for second. Convenience was the first. And I don't know if you're aware of Western University. They've been featured on NBC News, Brian Williams. They have over 30,000 students right now, so that number there on the bottom left is a little lower. But Time Magazine called Western Governors University the best relatively cheap university you never heard of. It's about $6,000 a year. It's competency-based online program, and it's now a national university. And you hear a lot about what they're doing through their innovative academic approach by not having the calendar, the academic calendar, dictate that you can only take 12 credits in the fall or 2 graduate courses. So, and they have degree programs in nursing and in business and in education and in health sciences. So it's certainly an institution worth looking at and see what they're doing at Western Governors. But I'm sure you see ads such as this. No matter where you're sitting on our campus. And that's a real ad from Utah State's master's program in professional and technical writing. And traditional schools are run by a government or a religious institution, and they're answerable to a board of trustees. But proprietary schools, these for-profit colleges, who could be in your state or headquartered out of another state and be licensed in your state, they're operated by a group of investors. And these are the largest ones here. And the Chronicle just had an article that said that Margaret Spellins, a former Secretary of Education, just joined the board of the Apollo Group, which owns the University of Phoenix. So those are some of the players, and I'm sure they're in your states and in the Northeast as well. And we'll talk about proprietaries for a second. Is that just in terms of master's degrees in education, in 2009, 3 universities, Walden, which is here in Florida as well, University of Phoenix and Grand Canyon, I think they're all 3 North Central Association of Colleges and Schools accredited. They're fully online, and they're all 3 for-profit. They conferred 12,509 master's degrees in education. So that's certainly interesting to look at. But today's students are certainly, they want a stripped-down version of higher ed, almost like they're choosing a bank or a health club. They want convenience and flexibility, and they want good service, and they want good instruction, almost 24/7 access, right? The only thing that, and the proprietaries have come along and have served these three things. The only thing is that they're not, in comparison to the public institutions, inexpensive. They're relatively expensive. So, but I put the ATM and the 24/7 up there because this is what our students now, their expectations are. You may not want the rock climbing wall with spinning classes on campus. And we need to know what our students want because they're the largest, the adult learners are the largest, most rapidly growing segment of our post-secondary education. And you may want to look at the part-timer and understand that what matters to them in order to keep them enrolled. And by knowing the right data, you can improve that experience for them. And there are some things that we can do to become competitive. And I don't know if you have varied program delivery variations, such as 8-week versus 15-week, or you offer multiple locations, or varied course formats, whether or not it's blended or hybrid or live or online, or accelerated degree completion, individualized degrees, modular, curricular, self-paced study. These are things that the best adult programs are doing some of these things. Here's one also, is that many colleges and universities now are offering discount deals. Private colleges are offering discount deals in terms of their tuition that cut, freeze, and even eliminate tuition altogether for incoming students. And there's a university there in Pittsburgh that's slashing tuition by 50%. I think I have it. The article has an institution in your area. Yes, Burlington College in Vermont is cutting tuition by 25% for the summer semester, and the college says that they won't raise tuition for the next year either. So be aware that some private institutions are looking at this. They're also offering discounts for various organizations. Almost colleges have now become like an airline seat, that people are paying different tuitions for the seat in the class. And it's sort of like an airplane ticket nowadays. And if you belong to this organization, you perhaps get an alliance discount or some kind of scholarship, but it's you're not paying the same amount as everyone else in the class. Everyone else on the airplane needs to pay the same amount. And 90% of adult learners are coming back to college or seeking that degree. It's for his or her job here. And to know our adult students, if you're new to this adult learner, the non-traditional student, there are many books out there who can help you get to know the adult learner. And I know I'm going quickly here, but it's not always these three equal adult triangles where they can devote equal amount of time to their family as they're juggling their family and their work in graduate school. Adult learners have adult problems, and we have to be aware of it. Okay, I have 12:50, and I know I covered a lot of material, but I want to open it up to questions. And I didn't get through some material that I was going to talk about student engagement, on how we can engage students. And I'll just mention Vincent Tinto. He's the guru from Syracuse in terms of attention. And George Koo, whether or not your institution does participates in SE survey, but that's a great instrument to know more about your students if you participate in SE. But the last slide I'll share with you before I conclude is that adult learners have a higher dropout rate or attrition rates than traditional students, whether or not that's at 2-year or 4-year institutions. I'm sure it's true for graduate programs as well, and it has nothing to do with ability, but it's everything to do with persistence and time management and wrestling with other work and family problems. So, one of the presidents here in Florida, he's no longer at Tallahassee Community College, he's now at St. Pete College, says, and I really love this quote, that if you don't teach, your job is to help the students get to class in the best condition for learning. Everybody has that responsibility, and when someone violates that, they violate more than a policy. They violate a core value. And I think as student affairs people, student service people, this quote should resonate with you, and certainly I hope that you would share that. Well, I gave you some things to think about, and that we certainly can't predict what the future of higher ed will be like, but most people are so busy reacting to the crisis of the day, the crisis du jour, that we don't do a lot of strategic thinking about the future. We don't take retreats anymore and start thinking about the future 2 years, 5 years from now. But leaders, effective leaders, aren't sitting around waiting for it. And many institutions are like this. If you always do what you've always done, you're going to always get what you've always got. And we need to be start thinking about how we do things, and maybe do things different, because as Einstein said, if you do the same thing over and over again, and you expect different results, well, that's what he says about insanity. Attention is really everybody's business. So I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions. And how am I doing, Ariana, or on time?
You're doing just fine. We have about 7 minutes left. So we do have, thank you, Dr. Hill. This has been some great information that you put forward. And there is a question. Our first question comes from Vincent James. He works at the School of Public Health at Harvard. And he was asking, are schools like WGU respected by by employers, and do employers prefer traditional schools versus schools like WGU and these online proprietary schools? And do you have any data that supports how employers are feeling about those schools?
Well, this whole notion of where you did your degree program, certainly that's, but they are a regionally accredited institution, and it was created by governors in 19 different states, so you can certainly look up Western governors. But yeah, there's certainly going to be people look down their noses at non-traditional programs or institutions, and it might be some of that, but I think that what they're doing is an outcome-based, so that they, and we're moving towards outcome-based education now, so their graduates have, they're NCATE accredited in terms of my area, teacher education, so they have the gold seal on their transcript that they completed a teacher education program approved and accredited by the National Association of Teacher Educators. So in terms of that field, their graduates are just as qualified as those who took time off to attend a bricks and mortar institution or a traditional residential program.
All right, thanks. I actually have a question for you, Dr. Hill. I'm part of the millennial generation on the older side, but the millennial generation that's graduating today, and certainly in the next 5 to 10 years, will be the ones filling all the positions that are largely vacated by the baby boomers. So these folks are going into a job field with different cultural expectations and core values and norms. Do you think that the norms of today's millennial generation going into the workplace, even with the pressures from employers to get master's degrees, that those norms may overtake that, and these students wouldn't pursue graduate study given their high debt ratio and their opportunities that might exist elsewhere with their existing degrees, and being able to put that, say, $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 that they invest in graduate school into developing entrepreneurial leadership and building businesses and things? Do you think that's something that's going to force us to have to start putting the resumes together and planning to do something else?
Well, that's a complex question, and there's no short answer. I'm the parent of a millennial child. She's going to be 25 this summer. She graduated with a degree in journalism, broadcast journalism, and is working in her field. And it's one of the few profession areas that you don't need to get an advanced degree. You can enter with the baccalaureate degree. But I think it's different for each industry, and maybe certifications, this whole notion of badges. If you read the Chronicle, this whole thing about credentialing and completing competencies or training certificates, we're going to have to rethink how we look at credentialing and skill sets. But maybe institutions will form memos of understanding and articulation agreements with the industry, and they'll get more into professional development and training and offer certificate programs, and that might be a great entry point or segue to convert them into a degree program. But yeah, I think that the millennial students certainly are going to look at the ROI before they take on more debt and really think through what's the outcome of this degree. Whereas we used to look at the undergraduate degree as great preparation for graduate school, and now we see a whole demise of the liberal arts. So it's a long, convoluted answer there, Marcus, but it's hard to paint all millennials with the same brush. But I think that anyone is reluctant to take on more debt right now, given our economy, unless they really saw the brass ring there at the exit of that degree program.
Okay, great, thanks. I guess I have another question. Well, if there's any further questions, we have a couple of minutes. If you want to ask them, you can enter them in the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen, so please feel free to do that. Dr. Hill, do you believe that employer demand, in terms of employers requiring or requesting that their employees obtain further education, will that become the only reason, do you think, in the next 5, 10, 20 years, or at any point in the future, that people are going back for master's degrees, that's the only reason that they consider rather than personal enrichment or career fields and things? Is that going to be the one and only reason at this point?
Well, in terms of undergraduate, I think this first year after UCLA does a survey, they've been doing it since the 60s. It's the largest longitudinal study. It's the freshman survey that they do. And we saw for the first time last year, business dropped down in popularity, and that certainly is equated to what's going on in the economy. But yeah, I think that people will pursue education for various reasons, and we don't want to just think that it's going to be tied into jobs, because people are going to change jobs. This generation changes jobs much more so than our previous generations. Many of our grandparents, they worked for the same employer their entire life, and those days are over. So will the purpose of higher education always be to supply workers to the global economy? Yet we're seeing that more and more, absolutely. And we're getting more into this public good versus the societal good of higher education. But I think that people will also do degrees for their own enrichment. And there's certainly degree programs that lend itself for that as well. And it's very tough to answer in a short amount of time.
All right. I always like to put folks on the spot, so I appreciate your candid answers. We're at 1 o'clock. There aren't any further questions right now. But you see, Dr. Hill has kindly provided his email address on the screen, so you're welcome to reach out to him. Dr. Hill, I want to thank you so much for your time today and presenting some really helpful information for us. And we hope you all enjoyed our first NEGAP webinar. We will be doing these monthly. And just so you're aware, the Texas Gap chapter, the Texas Gap chapter of NEGAP, will be hosting a webinar next week on the 21st, which is Thursday. And I'll actually be presenting on small things that impact your recruitment efforts and talking about ROI and social media and things. So please feel free to join us. There's information on our website at negap.net. And we will be sending out a survey to you to find out about your response about today's webinar and also some webinars that you're interested in for the future. So thanks so much for your time, and thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thank you, Dr. Hill and Ariana, for joining us.
Absolutely. Good luck, everybody.